Average working people, let's say that I'm an employer and you're an employee, and you're making, and just to make nice round numbers, let's say you're making $100,000 a year, and we have a 50% income tax. So you're taking home $50,000 a year, and I, as an employer, am writing a check for $100,000, to pay for your income. And I can make a living at that, and you can make a living with $50,000 in your pocket. And the government comes along and says, okay, we're going to cut taxes on working people from 50% down to 25%. And all the working people go, oh boy, I'm getting a $25,000 raise or a 25% raise because taxes are being cut by 25%. And so now you're making $75,000 at the end of the day out of the $100,000 check that I'm writing, and the government's only getting $25,000. But as the employer, I know you're willing to work for $50,000 a year. So what's going to happen? Well, and not just you. I know that there's a whole class of people who are willing to do that particular job, whatever it may be, for $50,000 a year. So either slowly by simply cranking down your wages, and just look to the auto industry if you want to see a classic example of this, or rapidly by firing you and hiring somebody else, I'll simply reduce the wage offering from $100,000 a year down to $75,000 a year, knowing that there's $25,000 going to taxes, and the person is going to end up with a $50,000 in their pocket anyway. And the point is that tax decreases on working people, tax cuts on working people, over time lead to a decline in income for working people. A gross decline in in income. And we've seen this. The Bush cut taxes on working people to some extent, and what happened? Wages went down. Reagan cut taxes on working people to a small extent, and to a small extent, wages went down. Roosevelt, Eisenhower raised taxes on working people, and what happened? Wages went up. See, similarly, let's say, again, I'm paying you $100,000, you're taking home 50% tax. Let's say the government raises the tax to 75%. Now I'm paying you $100,000, but you're only taking home $25,000. You won't work for that. I know you won't work for that. You know you won't work for that. So what do? I have to raise my gross pay to you up to $125,000. I realize these aren't particularly good numbers but so that you can end up taking home $50,000 again. It would be more than 125 with those percentages, but nonetheless, you get the point. And again, what we see is when taxes on working people go up, over time, wages go up. Now, with the rich, it's a very different equation. That's how it works for people who earn their living and spend virtually everything that they earn. For people who don't spend most of what they earn, when taxes go up, they end up, the amount of money that they are spending doesn't change because they're only spending a small portion of their income. So their spending doesn't change. But their savings or investment money goes down. So, in other words, they get less rich when taxes go up. On the other hand, when taxes go down, they get more rich. And this is what we've seen. Just in the last 3 years, the Fortune 400 or the Fortune 500s, the 400 wealthiest individuals, Forbes' wealthiest 400 individuals in the United States, their collective wealth just in the last 4 years, because of the Bush tax cuts on the ultra-wealthy, their wealth, combined wealth of these 400 individuals has gone from $600 billion to $1.3 trillion. So, and you say, well, isn't that great? That means they're going to build factories and they're going to stimulate the economy. No, it doesn't. They didn't build factories. They didn't stimulate the economy. What they did is they put more money in their Swiss banks' accounts. They might have built some factories in Vietnam or China, but not here in the United States. So, the bottom line is that if you just consider this in the real world sense, forget all the right-wing ideology that you've been hearing since Reagan first became president. It's wrong. The Laffer curve is wrong. The whole thing is wrong. And yet, I would say 100% of Republicans and 85%, probably 90% of Democrats believe this to be true. Even though it's wrong, they believe it to be true. That when the conventional wisdom is that if you lower taxes, people will have more money. Working people. The reality is that the only group, when you lower taxes, the only group who has more money is the rich. And the reason why, because if you lower taxes on working people, over time their wages will go down. If you raise taxes on working people, over time their wages will go up. Whereas with the rich, you lower taxes on the rich, they get more money. And so you've got rich commentators, you've got millionaires who are, the questions, for example, that David Gregory was asking on Meet the Press this weekend, perfectly reflective of this. The point of view of millionaires and billionaires is very well represented in the media. The point of view of the millionaires and billionaires in the media, they're out there, yes, it's true. Cut taxes, they end up with more money. Raise taxes, they end up with less money. But it's the reverse for working people. And I'm telling you, most Democrats don't realize this. They haven't bothered to look at history or study economics, number one. And the vast majority of working people don't know it because all of the people, not all of them, the majority of people in the media are millionaires. Since the 80s, since consolidation of our media, since the end of the Fairness Doctrine, and thus the end of the requirement to provide actual news, we've gone to infotainment, and what used to be reporters and news people have become stars. And as stars, they're very well compensated. And so they're all making high six and seven-figure salaries. And so it's true for them. If income taxes go up, they end up with less money, even over time. Whereas it's the opposite for working people. And, I challenge you to demonstrate that I'm wrong. You can't. You can look at history and you'll find that that's the case.